Welcome to More Than a Song, the podcast where we go beyond the music and discover the heart behind the lyrics. I'm your host, Tom Sears, and together with my daughter, singer-songwriter Breanna Megan, we'll explore the stories, the struggles, and the faith that breathe life into her songs. Because every song is more than words. It's a testimony, a prayer, and sometimes even a battle cry. In this very first episode, Breanna is going to talk about her song, In the Silence. It's a song born out of stillness, waiting, and learning to hear God's voice when everything else felt so quiet. What inspired it? How did God use that season to shape her? And what can we take away from our own walk with Him? Well, Breanna, we have talked about this for a long time, right? Your third album is in production. As a matter of fact, you're getting ready to release a new single, Free, which we may give the listeners a little sample of. But before we can get to that, we have to go all the way back. And like I said, this will be your third album. You have written every song on those albums, and you've written plenty more that one day, hopefully, will be recorded as well. So for the listening audience who may not know who you are, and maybe they haven't been exposed to your music, let's take them back to the beginning.
So I'm Breanna Megan. I wrote my first song when I was 8 years old. I remember getting home, and I don't remember what inspired the song, but I remember getting home. I ran up the steps, I grabbed a piece of paper, and I had one of those pens that was like the different collared pen type thing that you could click and have red, green, blue.
The fancy ones, like back from school days.
Yes. And so I grabbed that pen because I loved it, and I remember I just scribbled words, and I still have that paper today that I'll pull out randomly. And I couldn't tell you what the melody is. I couldn't tell you how it goes, but I just remember writing it from that child heart that just wanted nothing but Jesus. And I was, like I said, I was only 8, and I just was inspired. I think that was where the seed was planted for me, was in that moment. And then there were the times I remember sitting on my bunk bed, looking outside at the sun and writing songs. And really that's where my relationship with Jesus really grew, and where I felt Him as that best friend, the one that I could lean on, when there was no one else or I felt I was alone. And then that just progressed into where I am now, getting ready to release the single, and then, with the third album in production, and being able to go out and just sing and worship leading and all these things that I do. So it all began in that little room when I was 8 years old.
8 years old.
Yep.
But you don't remember the words to the song?
It was about Jesus dying on the cross for our sins, how He loves us, coming for us. It was like that.
Looking back on it now, does it look more like a worship moment, like a moment where, you were kind of just alone with Him and you were just maybe sharing how you felt?
Definitely. I think it was like, just that, like I said, that childlike faith, knowing that Jesus came for my sins. God sent Him for my sins. His only Son. He sent Jesus, His only Son, for me. And I remember asking God into my heart when I was 5, and I think I was just exploring what that meant for me. Of course, you're a pastor. I come from a long line of, people in the family that are pastors. And, I think, and I've told you this, like growing up, I've heard all the stories. I know what you've experienced, but I wanted to experience Him for myself. And I think even then I didn't recognize that's what I was doing, but I was trying to explore who He was to me.
Okay, so before we get into the song In the Silence, which is really what led, I think, as far as like the singer-songwriter, the writing of songs to actually record, tell everyone a little bit about you today, who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive right into the music.
Who am I? Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. I feel like I'm 26. I feel like I have so much to figure out in life, but currently, of course, I write my songs. I'm a worship leader here at our church in West Virginia. I'm a school teacher, 6th grade science, and that's really something that I try to pour my heart into because I try to be that light for many kids that don't have it. I am a high school volleyball coach, and I was hired to be a JV girls basketball coach, which I'll start that new adventure in November. So I've got different things going on. It seems like a lot, but then there's like times that it's like I don't know what to do sometimes. So yeah, that's me, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, that is a lot, and it's something that obviously I understand. Okay. So in the silence, and before we started recording this program, you asked me, about, transparency and just being authentic and real. And obviously I really feel strongly about that in every area of our life. So talk to our listeners about really, you talked about at 8 years old that the seed was planted, but really the first sign of, it's kind of like a garden. You go out and you plant a seed, and then over time, and you watch it every day, and then finally you see a sprout. In the silence, from my perspective, now this your music, and it is more than a song, but from my perspective, that is where the first sprout really began to show. So talk to us about In the Silence.
So In the Silence was written in a season of hurt, betrayal, pain. It was a season that I didn't understand. I had just graduated high school in 2017. The song was written October 25th of 2018. And I was trying to find who I was. I was trying to discover, what God wanted me to do. But in the midst of me attempting that journey, I was also dealing with the pain that would be outside circumstances that I had no control over. So the inspiration for the song really was, and this is really hard to talk about. It was my aunt and uncle. I was very close to both of them. They were like second parents to me. And there had been some rockiness in their marriage that I had noticed for years. And, the sleepovers became arguments. And it was just a battle that I saw, and it really hurt. And in 2016, they had separated. They no longer lived together. They no longer came to church. It was just a overwhelming situation. I didn't see my uncle anymore, and it was just a lot, especially for a teenager who was getting ready to graduate high school and trying to navigate that. And so then fast forward to 2018, they had divorced on October 22nd of 2018. And my aunt had picked up a habit where she would text me the 25th of every month. And I don't think she recognized it, but I did. It was just once every month. And this particular day, I just couldn't take it. And I received a text message. And I remember I was at our church helping with something, and I threw my phone across the hall. How it didn't break, I have no idea. But I yelled, "I'm not doing this anymore." And I went home, and I was at my breaking point, and I was like, I'm going to tell her how I feel. She's going to know the pain she's caused me. And I wanted her to feel a glimpse of what I had felt. And I was angry. I was bitter. I was in unforgiveness. I had a lot in my heart. And I did something that seems foolish because I was planning on telling her how I felt, letting her have it, so to speak. But I prayed, which isn't something normally you would do in that situation. And I was like, God, I'm going to tell her how I feel, but only if you want me to. And I sat in complete silence. It was just an overwhelming silence, really. Kind of like one of those silence that feels like it's just screaming at you, even though it's quiet. And so I came to our church and did what I do to kind of release whatever's happening. I grabbed my guitar and I started singing a Natalie Grant song. And I can't remember what the song's called, but it talks about, I know if you wanted to, you could wave your hand, spare me this heartache and change your plans. And I remember singing that from my heart, praying and crying out that God would change the situation that was this divorce, that was this pain. And I had never heard God's voice. At least I didn't think I had. And after I finished singing that song by Natalie Grant, I heard, grab a piece of paper and a pen. And it was simple, but I knew it was God. I knew that was him speaking to me. And so I grabbed the paper, I grabbed the pen, and the words, in the middle of uncertainty, will you meet me here, came out. And within 5 minutes, In the Silence was written.
You know, when a song is written, you definitely have more experience than I have, but when a song is written, it does sometimes come from a place of hurt. And I think that's, obviously I know this story. This is not news to me. But you know, our listening audience, they may not know. So in the middle of uncertainty, so it sounds like you were wrestling with maybe the feelings that you were facing as it related to their separation and ultimate divorce. And yeah, and this is, and ladies and gentlemen, this is still really, really raw to us. It's 7 or 8 years later now, and there's been a lot that's happened since that sort of, I don't know, cements this, but it is still very, very hurtful. So, you know, as we're recording this podcast, you know, Breanna had said to me before we started that she felt like this was going to be really, really challenging to talk about. And it is, because it did come from a place of hurt. And Breanna, did you find it challenging that God was using something that was so real to you to write music that, well, was so real?
Yeah, I mean, when you're going through pain and you're going through hurt, that's all you see. You know, it's kind of, we're very selfish people. And so you see your pain, you see your hurt, and you don't think about the other things that other people are going through. And when I was given that song, it kind of sat me back because, one, I had just heard God's voice for what I felt was the first time. And also, it was like, I didn't understand how God could take such pain and make a song that to me was beautiful. And honestly, it's a song that I have used like in my times of waiting and struggling and pain. It's a song that I always go back to because it says, in the silence, I will stand still. And it's a song that is kind of like my motto almost. Like, I don't understand what you're doing, God, but I'm going to trust you. I'm going to know that you've got a plan. And so, and my hope with all of my music is that when people hear it, that they can ultimately find Jesus through it, that they feel that connection with him, that it's not just a song they listen to, that it's, you know, it's my story, but it could be their story too, just in different circumstances.
Yeah, because what we face as Christians without a doubt others are facing as well. And so when you say in the silence, I will stand still, a principle that I've known for a long time that was taught to me, and I've used this is, if you don't hear God, you don't move. Is that kind of the premise of what that means? Like, in the silence, I will stand still. Is that very similar to what that principle that is instilled in me?
Yeah, because obviously life is still going to move forward. Life is still going to go on, and I'm obviously not going to curl up in my bed and just stay there because I don't hear what I'm supposed to do. But I'm not going to move forward into something that I don't feel God is leading me into. For instance, like my job. Like, if I pray, I try to pray about everything. And so, when it comes to coaching or my job or whatever, I'm like, God, do you want me to do this? And I wait to listen for his voice because I don't want to be outside of his will. I don't want to do something that goes against what he wants for my life. And so I always try to be faithful in that. As simple as I prayed about a vehicle. Like, is this the vehicle I'm supposed to buy? Because ultimately he knows. And some people might hear that and be like, well, that's silly, that's stupid. But I think, if we would just follow God in all aspects of our life, it'll lead us exactly where he wants us to be.
And sometimes figuring out where he wants us to be it's a process, isn't it?
It is. And sometimes it's a scary process.
One of the songs, not to jump ahead in the catalog of Breanna Megan songs, but one of them is Unknown. You wrote a song that's actually going to be on the third album. And it just talks about stepping out and trusting God in the unknown. And ladies and gentlemen, in our lives, there are a lot of unknowns, but let's talk about what is known. It's a God who is in control, who's not caught off guard by anything that we face. You're listening to More Than a Song with Breanna Megan. I'm Tom Sears, your host, and we'll be back. Hey guys, I wanted to tell you about 2 books that I've written that come straight from the heart. The first is Into the Deep, Pursuing Your Purpose by Pursuing Intimacy with God. It's about leaving the shallow waters of faith and diving into a life of true purpose and closeness with Him. This book has been a multi-year project. Started it about 5 years ago, worked on it from time to time, but this past summer was able to step away and really put everything together. The second book is While It Is Day, Living with the Eternal Urgency. And in it, I share the importance of living every moment like it matters for eternity, because time is short. The foundation of that book is a sermon that I had preached not that long ago from John chapter 9, verse 4. Both books are available right now on Amazon. Just search Into the Deep or While It Is Day by Tom Sears, and I believe you'll be encouraged and challenged to go deeper with God.
In the middle of uncertainty, will you meet me here? Will you bring me closer to your heart? I'm stuck between what's right and wrong. I'm wanting to hear from you, but I'm questioning everything.
Welcome back to More Than a Song. Every song carries a meaning. Behind the melody, behind the lyrics, there's always a story. Sometimes a struggle, sometimes a prayer, sometimes a celebration. And that's what this podcast is all about. Peeling back the layers and discovering the heart behind the music. This is More Than a Song with Breanna Megan, and I am your host, Tom Sears, her dad. Before the break, we were talking about the lyrics to her song, In the Silence, and now we want to go even deeper into the meaning, because when you really listen, you'll find that a song isn't just something you hear, it's something you feel. and something that speaks to your soul. How does that song In the Silence speak to you?
Well, as I said, it's one of those things that, in uncertainty, standing still. But I remember when I wrote the song, it was kind of like the old cartoons that have the angel and the devil on your shoulder type of thing. And I remember just, questioning God, wondering what to do, asking for guidance, but it felt like it was just the silence was blaring. And so it really was, for me, an important moment of my life, because I think it was the first time that I really had to, make a true decision, how to handle a tough situation. I got to hear God's voice for the first time, but also remembering and recognizing that God is in control, even when it doesn't make sense.
Some of our listeners may be listening to this and they're saying, okay, so you were upset about, a family member or, your aunt and uncle divorcing, and, she had sent a text message. And maybe they're saying, well, that doesn't seem like a whole lot to be upset about. I mean, it is upsetting, but upsetting enough to write a song about it.
So, if you're listening and you're wondering that, you're asking that question, I think it's important to realize that, one, I said that they were like second parents to me. And what that meant was they were faithful members of our church. My aunt was the secretary at our church. She was a part of the worship team. My uncle, he helped run the camera, and he did a lot of behind the scenes things. He helped, take care of the, church maintenance and things like that. So he did a lot as well. And then, they were always going out to eat with us. They were going on vacations with us. We were always, my brother and sister and I were always going to their house to sleep over. I mean, and that was something that I had done since I was a child. And so the relationship was there. And then when they separated back in 2016, I never saw my uncle anymore, or my aunt, but I'm going to talk about him for a second. I never saw him. I think he came to my graduation, and I think I saw him one more time after that. So I think I saw him twice after that separation. And then my aunt, who was a huge part of our lives, who was always there, who I could talk to about anything, and she was gone. And it wasn't a gradual thing that faded. It was a sudden thing that felt like a piece of me was gone. The relationship was gone. The love felt like it was gone. And so it wasn't just divorce. There was no relationship anymore. And then it became ritualistic of the 25th of every month. Hey, how are you? And it felt like I didn't know her anymore. It felt like she wasn't who I had grown close to. And it made me angry and bitter. And so it wasn't just a divorce. There was no relationship. I mean, I had reached out to my uncle, I texted him, and we had talked a couple of times. I was always like, you can come around, but he felt awkward with it because it was, she's your sister. So, he was married into the family. So it was probably really awkward for him. And it changed our entire family dynamic. We were very close. Like our entire family was close. And it just changed everything to where now nothing is the same. And that's why it still hurts today, because nothing is the same with anything. And so it's a lot. And it was a lot for, at the time, a 19-year-old girl who was just trying to figure out life to experience when I had never experienced anything like that before.
And you talked about, sharing things with her. And, at one point in time, and I know this, she was a very prominent voice in your life. Like you could go to her and share things with her. And so not only was the absence so impactful, but would you agree that voice at a time when you needed an extra person to to hear you, that voice not being there, that was also very impactful.
Yeah, I mean, there were many times, I mean, I remember going to her house, we would sit on the swing, and I would just have like heart-to-hearts, or before they had moved to the new house they had, we would sit on the couch and just talk. And I remember feeling comfortable to ask questions with her that I was kind of nervous to even ask my own mom, Not that I didn't trust my mom, but it was just like there were things that I felt I could ask her that I couldn't, or I could, but I didn't.
Didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah. And I also remember seeing how close she was to God. And I remember being young and thinking, I want the relationship that she has with God, because I saw the genuine spirit. I saw the tears. I saw the hands lifted when her world was crashing down, when dreams that she wanted wasn't coming to fruition. And yet I saw a woman of faith standing true in Jesus. And then when it all ended, it was like, how am I supposed to trust anyone when someone could be so close to God, but then all the things that happened, and that just seemed like it was just stripped away. And then another thing was, how could someone so close to God just leave? And so there was also that during that time, I was probably angry with God as well, because I was like begging and pleading that God would restore their marriage and bring them back together. And I wasn't seeing that happen. And I was angry because it was like, God, why are you allowing this to happen? Why would you allow our entire world to be uprooted? And so I was angry for a really long time. But with that, just a few short months later, on New Year's Eve, I prayed a prayer and I said, God, I want to be who you want me to be. And so will you strip me and do whatever you need to do to make me who you want me to be? And I can tell you that was the hardest prayer I ever prayed. And I remember waking up that next morning and it felt like the battle was real. And that was a really tough season for me. But it has made me and shaped me to be who I am and continuing to become who I'm supposed to be.
Do you think the struggle, because you talked about, I believe you said in October, you wrote In the Silence, 2018.
Yeah.
And then I assume the following New Year's is when you prayed that prayer. So within a few months, do you think that what you were feeling with, the internal turmoil, really, that was sort of the precursor or the beginning of maybe even a bigger struggle or a bigger battle, maybe that's a better way of putting it?
I think so. But it was also taught a lot of lessons that I, I wouldn't know unless I went through that. And I think that's, as Christians, we always hear it's going to be hard, but, there are things we have to go through to be able to become the person we're supposed to be. And I look back, and although it was one of the worst seasons of my life, I'm thankful for it, because without it, I wouldn't be who I am. But that battle led to forgiveness. It led to redemption. As I said, in October, I hated her. I did. I hated her. I was angry with her. I didn't feel like I loved her. Like the feelings were real. And yet I prayed a prayer, God, make me who you want me to be. And that kind of seems counterproductive, like you're feeling all these things, but you're asking God to make you who he wants you to be.
Well, it sounds like an internal struggle, a battle between what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. And I go through this epic struggle, this epic battle. And it was in June of 2019. And I remember laying in bed, and I had said earlier that day out loud, I said, I forgive you. And I remember going to bed that night. I couldn't sleep. It was a Saturday night. I had to get up early for church, and I couldn't sleep. And it was like 2 a.m. And I felt like God wanted me to, like, he's like, you said you forgive her, but now I want you to tell her you forgive her. And again, I hated her in October. I wanted to tell her off. I wanted to tell her how I felt. And then a few months later, I'm forgiving her, and God wants me to tell her that I forgive her. And so I remember saying, I forgive you, but I want you to know why I forgive you. And I went through everything, every hurt, every trial, every battle that she caused. And I said, but I forgive you for these things. And it was a very redemptive moment for me because the anger was gone. The frustration was gone. I mean, the frustration was still there. I can't say it wasn't, but the anger was gone, and I had forgiven. And now, a few years later, I would have another battle, another internal struggle when it came to her that I had to overcome. But in that moment, it was like, this is why I wasn't supposed to tell her off, as silly as that may sound. Like, I knew.
So again, the struggle, let's point back to in the silence. And thank you for sharing that, because I know it's not easy to kind of relive some of that. It's not easy for me either. But there's a portion, you said earlier in this program that it was like the devil and an angel on each shoulder. And there's a portion of the song that says, I'm stuck between what's right and wrong. Talk about that.
So I'm stuck between what's right and wrong. Like, I knew telling, someone, how you really feel in anger wasn't right, yet I wanted to. And so it was like, I know it's right, but I want to do what's wrong right now. I want to make her feel the pain, the struggle. But really, that could be with any area of life. There's always two paths you can choose, right and wrong. And so, in that moment for me, it was, do I tell her or do I not? And I knew I shouldn't, because that was wrong, but I wanted to. And then another portion of the song, I say, my flesh is pulling, my spirit's leading, and I'm stuck right here. And when I talk about that, or when I envision it, it's like I feel like, the tug of war games where you got a team on each side. I feel like I was in the middle of this rope, and I was being tugged on both sides, my flesh on one side, my spirit on the other. And I just felt like I was being ripped apart, because my flesh, obviously, our natural nature is to, do things we shouldn't do. And our spirit is, that living, active, breathing spirit that God gave us to be able to say, no, that's wrong. You cannot do that. And I just felt like I was in a battle there.
It's, as we've said, songs are birthed sometimes from pain. And they're on that first album, and I'll let you say the name of that first album there.
It was Near.
And there were 9 other songs that you wrote. And over the next 9 programs, we'll talk about those other songs as well. Into your second album that was titled
The Rescue.
It also has 10 songs. And then the newest album set to release sometime this year. There's been that'll be a series of podcasts on its own. Just the frustration, because that recording of that album happened almost 3 years ago now.
Yeah,
we're pushing 3 years, and so that'll be a story to share. But been a little bit of trouble there, but we got connected with someone that could. And it just occurred to me, the name of the album is Piece by Piece, and I almost said, we've encountered someone who's helping us pick up the pieces of that album. And that's kind of, wow, that's kind of prophetic.
That is kind of,
Yeah.
crazy. I never thought about that.
Yeah, piece by piece. And so we've connected with a guy that is putting the pieces of the album literally back together again after someone else dropped the ball. But we don't want to get bitter here. We don't want to get bitter. But yeah, so I don't know. This is something that we've talked about. This program, we've talked about it for several years, and I don't know. I'm obviously honored to be across the room on the microphone with you on this. Your music has been such a big part of my life, and I don't know. I guess there's others in the family that would say, that may argue with this, but I'm probably your biggest fan. You know, I blare your music all the time. I actually, and it's not just because she's my daughter. Obviously, there's a large part of that, you know, that she is my daughter, and I'm proud. But her songs are really good, and they really, really reach where a person is, and as she's outlined here, In the Silence came from a family struggle that God has used. Now, I've seen you, you know, on many stages at this point, singing that song, and not sharing that story as in depth as you have shared it here. But we're going to end this particular episode here shortly, and this will be the hardest part, right? Is that you talked about your frustration with your aunt, and then you said, you know, God, there was a redemptive moment, and God brought you through. But then there was some stuff that came up a few years later, and I don't know why there's hurt in our lives, and I mean, we live in a fallen world, but this is something that's also very, very difficult for me to continue to process as well. So share about the moment that came up that kind of set you back again. And I know it'll be challenging, but hopefully someone out there listening really needs to hear what you're about to say.
I'm going to try to not cry, but I'm already teary-eyed and you can hear it. So as I said, I was extremely close to my Uncle Eric. He was a huge part of my life. And on July 15th, 2023, we were headed home from vacation when you got a call or a text.
It was a text, yeah. I received a text.
That he had passed away.
Yeah, the text simply said, Eric died last night. And it set me back. And as odd as this sounds, and maybe as horrible as this sounds, I was trying to think of all the Erics that I knew so that it wouldn't be him, but I knew, you know, and, but go ahead.
And when, because you and Mom weren't in the vehicle at the time, and when you got back, you know, I could just see it all over your face. Something was wrong. And of course, my mind is racing of what it could be. But I immediately think something's wrong with someone at the church. I mean, that's where my mind went, you know, that ministry-minded mind, right? And Mom told us, and I don't remember exactly what I did. I think I screamed. I think I wailed or something. I don't know exactly what I did.
I just remember, and, you know, I wrote that book, Into the Deep, this past summer, and I talk about this a little bit in there. And the way I put it in the book, and I'll state it here, is that I heard the three of you wailing. You know, Thomas was a little more reserved. He's more kind of internal, but what I heard coming out of my children, who two of them at the time were adults, you and Thomas were adults at that time, but what I heard, I hope I never have to hear again. It was awful.
And So when I heard it, obviously that was a lot. And so, yeah, after that, I just went through, I blamed her. I was angry with her. And, I once again hated her. I blamed her and I hated her. And, I finally got to the place where I had, told her, I wrote a letter to her and I said, you're either going to be in my life or you're not. There's going to be things that I want you to experience, when I get married, when I have children, but you have to make an effort to be in my life. And since then, we talk every once in a while. It's definitely not the same as it used to be. She'll text me every once in a while. And I do talk to her when she texts me, but it's definitely not the same. When I see her, I hug her, I tell her I love her because I do, but it's not the same and it never will be the same. But I want to go back to the day finding out that he had passed away real quick, if I can. It was the night before we found out, so it would have been the night he died, really. I had a dream, and in the dream, he always wore like camo shorts and a hat. Like he was a redneck.
He was.
He wasn't fashionable at all. But in this dream, he had walked into a room and I was standing there and he simply looked at me and said, "I love you, baby girl," and turned around and walked away. And then when I found out that he had passed away, it was kind of like, although I still don't have closure over it, to be honest, it was kind of like a moment of him telling me one last time, "I love you."
Yeah.
And then I had found text from the last time I talked to him, and he had said, "God is going to do amazing things in you, but you already know that.
Yeah.
Just keep trusting him," which was so profound for him to even say, because he wasn't like, all religious and all these things.
He had these struggles.
Yeah. But
And they were public struggles. I mean, like everybody knew, right? I mean, but he went on a mission trip with me to India. He was a good uncle. I can remember when you guys were children, and you guys were a huge a part of his life, and his death continues to. I don't know. It's just our lives are totally different, and if you're out there listening, and you've experienced that, that's many prayers, because we understand the pain and we understand the hurt. We've been talking about her song "In the Silence," and listening to that song makes me think about what you were talking about with the broken relationship with your aunt, and how someone you love, especially a family member, becomes strained. The relationship becomes strained or broken. In those moments, silence can be one of the hardest things to deal with. It's not just the absence of words, it's the weight of what is left unsaid. The silence after harsh words, or after a bad situation or a broken relationship. The silence when forgiveness hasn't yet come. You talked about that. You talked about that in your music and your song there. And the silence when you're waiting for reconciliation that hasn't completely happened, and you touched on that as well. Like you said, it's not the same. That's the kind of silence that Breanna's song really captures. It's that place where your heart is aching for connection, but you're left in the quiet, searching for peace. And yet, even in those broken moments, those broken family moments, those broken relationships, God reminds us that his presence can still fill the void that is silence. Where there's distance, he can bring healing. Where there's hurt, he can bring restoration. And the silence becomes not just empty space, but a place where he begins to speak and to comfort us. And honestly, you talked about that redemptive moment where he comes to heal us.
Yeah, if I could just, say this to anyone listening that's, maybe you're battling with situations like this, or, maybe your situation looks different and you're just waiting for God to answer or redeem or restore. I said I was angry with God, and I was for a time. And he can take our anger, but it's important that you keep going to him, that you keep finding him, that you keep searching for him. You know, even in anger, even in pain, he's still a loving God that has never left your side. And so if I could encourage you, it would be to, even if you're struggling with him, don't leave him. You know, keep going to him. Keep lifting your hands when you don't feel like it. Keep praying when you don't feel like it. Because he is a good and faithful God. And, you know, he is longing for a relationship with us. He's not afraid of your questions. He's not afraid of your anger. He's not afraid of your trials. He just wants you. And, you know, it says to go to him in spirit and in truth. And sometimes our truth is anger. And sometimes what we're feeling is pain. But we need to still go to him in those moments because, again, he is faithful and he just wants that relationship with you. And he can heal what's broken, even if it doesn't look or turn out like you want it to.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What an incredible conversation about In the Silence. Our next episode, we'll move right through the list of songs on the Near album, is Never Changing. You chuckle. Why did you chuckle?
Well, whenever I was putting the list together for Near, thankfully I was able to, you know, say exactly how I wanted the songs to be listed. And I put Never Changing right after In the Silence on purpose, because even though it was a hard situation, God is still the same yesterday, today, and forever. Amen. And I can feel what I feel because I live in a sinful world, but my God is never going to change. And that's why I put it there, and that's why I chuckle, because it's so fitting.
So make sure you tune in to the next episode of More Than a Song with Breanna Megan. We will go over and dive into the lyrics of Never Changing. I think today we've been reminded that every song has a story, and every lyric carries what is a deeper meaning. And you've heard that deeper meaning today with Breanna, as she was very open and transparent. Because to her, it's not just about a melody. It's about the message. It's about the journey, and it's about the heart that is behind the songs that she writes. So maybe today it spoke to you and it spoke to your story, because you do have your own story about silence in a relationship or silence in your walk with God, whatever it may be. Our prayer is that this program encourages you to lean on the everlasting arms and to have that quiet time or that quiet place to hear his voice, so that he can begin to speak hope and healing into your life. I want to thank you for joining us on this very first episode of More Than a Song with Breanna Megan. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please make sure you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We're a part of the Anchor Point Media Network. And make sure you subscribe and like. That helps get this message of it being more than a song out there. Don't forget to share this with your friends, with your family members, because they need a little encouragement as well. Breanna, thank you. Thank you for opening up your heart, sharing your music, and showing us that it really is more than a song.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I really enjoyed it.
So until next time, remember, oh, wait a minute. I told them we may give them a little sneak peek. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out with a little sneak peek of the song that is her next single to be released very soon. And by the way, all of her music can be found on all of the music platforms. That's the word. I almost said podcast. All the music platforms, including Apple. And this song that we'll go out with is called Free. It is fresh out of production. So until next time, remember, every song has a story. Every story can point us back to the one who gives us a song to sing in the first place. God bless you. My name's Tom Sears. This has been More Than a Song with Breanna Megan. Take care.
Walking on the road to Mount Calvary,
treated